and you're, fully aware of what's going on in McCormick. You probably know about Miss Kennedy and how she taught here for so long and did such an excellent job teaching English in the middle school. And I think you were in the elementary for a little bit too.
Yes.
Basically teaching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of McCormick children who are now adults. So think about just how exponentially that grows into so many people in this area who know and respect Miss Ethel Kennedy here. So we're glad and really honored to have her here today to talk to you about a very important period in the history of McCormick, the late 1960s and early 1970s, the period when the schools went from being segregated to integrated. All right, now, none of us really can talk about that with any certitude because we didn't live through it. I didn't live around here. I lived in Washington, D.C. growing up, and I'm not exactly old enough to remember when that took place up that way. That's not saying you're a little bit older than me, so you remember it. And Ms. Calaham also remembers these days. And so the purpose of this is to have these two ladies speak of that time period of the late 60s and early 70s, the feeling in McCormick, what it was like when schools integrated, what was the feeling in the community, what was McCormick like back then. It was a lot bigger. There was an industrial base, there were several, I think, mills, and McCormick High School was much bigger back then. I think we were a AAA school at one point in the early 70s, and now we're obviously single A. And so though it was a different time period completely, and one that really we're lucky to have some oral history right here in front of you, and it really encouraged you to ask some sincere, good questions about what that was like back then when it comes time to ask questions. So you're really privileged to be here in this setting with these wonderful ladies, and I don't have anything more to add except for we're going to talk about, again, the events that took place in the late 1960s and early 1970s when integration got a little bit of a stumbling start and then, became fully realized during that time. So without any further ado, did you want Ms. Calaham to speak first?
She's coming up with me, yes. Good evening. Can you hear me? Good evening. We're glad to be here. My name is Mrs. Ethel Kennedy. I see a few familiar faces from the ball court or just in passing, but it's an honor to be here. I was born in the 50s, long time ago. There's a lot I remember from my earlier years. I can go back to first grade, before segregation. So we'll go back some years, Ms. Calaham and I, and kind of bring you up to 1971 when the schools in McCormick were integrated. It was a rough year, a rough time, because it took a lot of adjustments for all of us, but we made it through. And we're thankful that we did. Because of us making it through, you have so many opportunities today that you would not have had if things were not changed. So we thank God for the change. You're going to hear me mention God because I am a Christian and I don't try to hide it. And I know that's the person that brought us through. So at this time, Ms. Calaham and I, we're going to talk about segregation. Can anyone give me a definition for segregation? I am a teacher. So you probably were expecting a few teacher questions, right? Segregation. Stand up, please. Very good. I'll read what I kind of jotted down. Segregation. The action or state of setting someone or something apart from other people or things to be set apart. And you said that. And that's exactly what happened in the earlier years. I can remember being at then Mims High School. I can remember the books, the old books. I can remember the old desk. I can remember the old chairs. I can remember everything basically going from second grade, how things were so different for us. I don't know how things were at the other school, but I know at our school things were different. We had, a lot of times we had to make use with what we had, and we did not have a lot. But it did not stop us for yearning for an education and wanting better things. So at this time, Ms. Calaham and I are going to kind of talk, bounce off of each other about the things that we went through being segregated. One thing I distinctly remember with segregation, I always wanted books to read. I've always been an avid reader, but there were not books in my home. I did not have books. My mother could not afford to purchase books. So I would have to just sometimes pretend to read things. And I remember seeing a sign as a young child, see the world in a book. See the world in a book. And that was my yearning, to see the world in a book. So whatever you do in life, if you don't travel, see the world in a book. And that was my yearn from a second grade child to loving reading and not having anything to read. You are blessed to have books, to have a phone to get the book on. You're better than blessed. We were not afforded that opportunity as children growing up. Ms. Calaham.
The part I like to share about books is when we went to school, there was no segregation. I'm just a little bit older than Ms. Kennedy. So what they did was at Ms. school, we had, we call him Professor Prof. He would be like a bridge in between the schools, the white and the black schools. So what we did, in order for us to get books, he would get the old books that they finished that was not always good books. And that's how we learned in our school. We would get the books that they had at their school, and then the books was brought over to the black school. The schools was quite different. The learning was quite different. So we just didn't depend on what we could get from there. The teachers was those kind of teachers that didn't care what your mama said or what your daddy said. They was teachers, they was mamas, they was everything. So when they stood up, you know to sit down and to shut up. Never had any problems. The one thing they did was they taught. They taught not only from those books that was given to us, but they taught from what they knew. And so we was taught in our home. I come from a family of 12. And whatever those older ones knew, we knew. Even as how to take care of our bodies, even how to do our hair. We was taught to go out, get into the grass, and we was taught how to braid hair from doing it in the grass. We didn't have refrigerators then, we had ice box. And, we was called at that time colored people. But the white people had the refrigerators, and we had to go and get ice and chop it up. When you went to get these big blocks of ice, they had ice screens. And our parents would take those screens and they would put it down into a drink bottle and would teach us how to braid hair. They would take it and they would teach us body parts. We took what we had and we learned and we made from it. That was our way of surviving through this. Schools was different. We played basketball. We had football. We had different sports. But there was the white sports, there was the black. We never came in together to play as a team. Later on in years when we started going way off to play, you would see that they had been integrated, so we did get a chance to play every once in a while with the white team or with a couple of them that was mixed. Our school was totally different. But we went with the mind of you got to get it, and no matter where you get it from. And that was the important part. You got to get it. And when we got it, we shared it. We shared it with the neighborhoods. We shared it with all the children. We played school, and that's how we taught each other what we couldn't get. But the things that Mr. Mims did was he did the best that he could. and speaking out for the colored people and teaching them how to make what you want out of what you had. That part, that was a rough part, but it didn't affect our lives because there was a togetherness in our community and there was a togetherness in our lives as growing up. The only thing is, there was a difference in education because it was rising so, and we was here grabbing what we could grab under here, so some schools always started ahead of us. Ms. Kennedy, I'm gonna say a little bit about what happened in the town of McCormick. This is how we lived. We lived to teach each other, but yet it was things that we couldn't do. We could wash the white people clothes, we could cook in their kitchens, we could babysit with them, we could do almost anything there, but there was a separation that we couldn't go in the drugstore. The drugstore in McCormick had some stools. You can go in there, you could go and buy ice cream, you can go and get your milkshakes, but you could not sit down. We were not allowed to sit down. If somebody white would come, as they come, we would have to step back and let them get what it is that they were coming at. Then we would have to stand there a while, and sometimes it all depends on who was in there. They might make you stand there 20, 25 minutes before they ask you what you want. Get it and go. That was the thing, get it and go. We wasn't allowed to look in white people's face. Yes, sir, your hair was down. You were taught with your head down. This is the difference. This is actually what you had to go to. Hey, when you went to the doctor's office, we went in the back way, and we had to sit on one side, and they sit on the other side, going to see the same doctor. No matter how sick you was, you still had to wait your turn. You might go to the doctor, might be very sick, and you stay there all day because the white was coming in, and you just had to wait. This is how it was. We had a movie. It was a movie, but we could not sit in the bottom of the movie. They separated us. We had to sit at the top so that we would not be together. We could not, if you had to use the bathroom, you better use it before you get there. We could not use the bathroom. So later on, you could see they did start making the bathroom for the color, for the white. This is just a time in McCormick town that we grew up. We could work the fields. We would only get products from the field, not money. And the money we got was very few money. But it didn't, how did it affect my home life? It didn't. Because where we was in school, we was always taught good, better, best. Never let it rest.
Good is better. And better is
the best. And that's what I grew up with. Mama said the same thing. My daddy said the same thing. And so that's how it was embedded in me. I got to do it. I can't settle for good. I can't settle for best. I got to push it. I got to scrape, and I got to scrub. I got to be the best. So that was a part of how we grew up. Mama would keep the children, but we couldn't play with the children. They brought the separation much in the neighborhood. If they didn't have anywhere else to go, the children had to come with us. And our parents had to put them before they put us. But it didn't really matter because we knew the love that was coming from our parents in our heart and the struggle and how they wanted us to be. That was a part of how we grew up in McCormick.
Ms. Calaham is a little older than I am. I remember those things I am of 6 children, 3 older and 3 younger. I was in the middle. I remember those things. I didn't realize we were poor until I was probably in high school, ready to graduate. Because as Ms. Calaham said, and I grew up in a single parent home, but my mother never treated us as poor. My mother never treated us as beneath anyone. She taught us, you are just as good as the next person. And that grew up in me. always knowing that I was just as good as the next person, that I was just as great as the next person, that I could use the tools that I had to be the person that I wanted to be. At an early age, I had a yearning to be a teacher. I remember hearing my brother, when I retired, at my retirement dinner, saying, my sister didn't become a teacher in college. She was a teacher at an early age, because we would sit in the grass and I was the teacher. Have any of you heard of the Dick, Jane, Sally book? Ron, Dick, Ron, Sally, Ron, Dick, and Sally. That was my reading material. As Ms. Calaham said, I don't know where that book came from. I don't know the Mr. Prof. Mims that she's talking about, but just in name. But I remember having that book. I remember reading that book, and the words were repetitious, but that's how I learned. So when I grew up, all of my grandchildren has a series of those books, the Dick, Jane, and Sally book. They were our sight words. That's how I learned to read, with the Dick, Jane, and Sally books. But my mother in the home would talk education. My mother was an 11th grade dropout because of teenage pregnancy, but she taught us in the home the things that she knew because she wanted better for us. But the movie theater, I never went to the movie theater in McCormick. I knew they had one. Later in life, when we integrated, I went into the drugstore, but I never went in and was asked to move. Why? Because we didn't even have a vehicle. We didn't have a vehicle. We went to school, we went back home, and that's where we were. But I knew the outside world from my siblings, but I guess I was sheltered from a lot of it because I was that middle child. But you know, even looking back and listening to what Ms. Calaham is saying, when I think about segregation, racism, and all of those things, it's innate in people. Racial segregation in the United States is the segregation of facilities, our schools, services, opportunities such as housing, medical care, education, employment, transportation in the United States along racial lines. And it started way back. It didn't start just now. All of the racial things that's going on now, from the White House to the Brown House, it didn't just start right now. It was going on, as you hear us talk, back in the 50s, back in the 60s. But we have so many more opportunities now. You know, I think about all that Ms. Calaham said, and I cringe, because a lot of times we think about those things as terrible times. But those things were stepping stones to get us to where we are now. Some of my best friends are white folks, Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt and I developed a relationship over, 10 years ago? And we're still good friends. But I thank God that those opportunities back then allowed us to get to where we are now. That segregation was a time period that we went through, and they were hard times, harder for some than others, but those are times you can't relate to. But you need to read your history. You need to study your history to see where people came from, how you got to where you are. Osmosis didn't just land you here. People died to get you here. How many of you know, have read about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights leader, and all those leaders, Thurgood Marshall, Harriet Tubman? Think about the reports you did in 5th grade during Black History Month, where you had to choose an African American and do a report on that person. I remember when I taught here, my children had to become that character for the day. And then that night we had a program where they actually performed being that person. It's difficult to walk in other people's shoes, but when you've lived it, when you went into the theater and you had to sit back, when you went into the drugstore and they pushed you back. I remember, and I was telling Ms. Calaham about this, my mother worked at a truck stop here in town, and she would get off work at that truck stop, and I don't know what the owners did at night, but my mother kept the children in our home. The 2 of the children, they came in our homes in the evening for some hours, and we had to babysit them. That's how I learned to love children. And they were not my children. I was not even a teenager. But I can remember keeping those two children, playing with those two children. But these same two children, these same adults, if they saw us out, they could not have a conversation with us. They could not relate to us. Why? Because that was the time period in which we lived. My mother worked at that truck stop and came home every night and went back every day and worked that truck stop probably until I was out of high school. And we kept those children. Those children are grown now. But you know, when I see those children now, I see one of them more than the other. When I see them now, they remember my mama. You know, my mama's dead and gone, but to hear those children talk about Mama Melvin, it means a lot. So we went through a lot. The time period that we went through, we had to endure a lot. But when you see change, when I see change, when I see and hear Dave Lee Nelson talking to me and relating back to when they were children and they came to our house and my mother treated them like she treated us. If we ate, they ate. That let me know that that time period that we were living in, they did not get stuck there. A lot of people get stuck in the time period. You see all the stuff going on in Washington, D.C.? Somebody got stuck in segregation. Somebody did not progress from segregation. These supremacist groups that you see, somebody got stuck in segregation. Somebody did not teach in the home that God is love. Somebody did not tell somebody that this is not the way you treat people. This is not the way you get things done. This is not the answer to the problem. Let's sit down and reason out a solution. Let's hammer it out so we can get better results. And I'm thanking God that Ms. Calaham and I had parents. She had two. I had one and a grandmother. I came from the village of the grandmother in the home. But that grandmother taught us to love people. And when you can love people, you don't see color. You just love people. And I'm glad that I went through the time period of segregation that I did because it taught me to be a better person. It taught me that I could be a better person. And my mother always told us, stand up, speak your point, be polite in doing it, don't get in any trouble, but if it gets to be a problem, I'll come to that school. And she did. I had a tough mama, a really, really tough mama. And we knew if we got in trouble in school and we were right, mama was coming. She was not going to uphold us in the wrong, but she would come if we were right. So that's the time period that we went through. And getting through that time period got us to the period of integration. Integration, definition. Don't everybody speak at the same time. Integration, yes. I'm sorry, I missed your point. To come together. Integration, the action or process of being integrated. Can someone give me a synonym for integration? Integration. Synonym. He said coming together. Come on. You just sitting there looking at me? Unity. Unity. If I can't hear you, I'm sorry. Combine. Very good. And that's what happened in 1971 for me. For me. I remember 7th grade. We were not integrated. My teacher, Mrs. Elizabeth Wilson, Miss Wilson, boy, she was tough. And everybody wanted to be a Miss Wilson because she was a tall, beautiful, strong-willed, but caring black woman. And I think every black girl at my school in 7th grade, at recess, we turned into Miss Wilson. You better get over there and sit down and you better do it now. We turned into Miss Wilson on the playground. You will not do that in my classroom. Get over there and sit down, and I will be with you shortly. and you knew you were in trouble. When she came to you, the look on the way allowed you to know you were in trouble. But we knew that look, that stern voice, and that strong-willed woman was the woman that meant us well, because we turned into her on the playground, in the hallways. We mocked her. Integration the next year, 7th grade, was a good year for us. That was the end before integration. In 8th grade, that same Miss Wilson was still there, and she was our savior. I remember the first day of integration, terrified. Got off that bus, and they led us down. How many of you remember the old middle school over by the football field, the Dorns Field? I went to school there, and I remember stepping off that bus that morning, and I was terrified. New surroundings, not knowing the known. When we don't know the known, fear sets in. Fear sets in. But in the back of my head, I could still hear Mama saying, "You're just as good as anybody else." And I remember my mama having a talk with us, because I had some brothers, and they were not nice boys. I remember leaving home that morning and hearing my mama do her mama talk. You go to that school, you do what you're supposed to do. If I have to come, you make sure you're not in fault when I get there. I remember her having that talk with my brothers. Not so much the girls, but I remember her having that talk with my brothers. And stepping off that bus that morning being terrified, still in the back of my mind thinking, I am just as good as anybody here. I am just as good as anybody here. Fear was there. We went into our classrooms that morning, and my first class was Mr. John Bailey that morning. Things were not good in that class, because Mr. Bailey was a kind of playful person. He was very playful, and he did a lot of playing, and things were not under control that first period. And I thought, oh my God, why did they do this to us? Because they took over our classroom that morning. They played, they talked, they name called, they told them what they were not going to do. And I'm thinking, we cannot go a year like this. He has to bring this under control. But he did in that first period. And we got a little break. And during that little break, it was worse than being in his classroom, because no one was there to really protect us from the name calling, the bumping, the pushing. But I could hear my mama saying, don't get yourself in any trouble, because if it's your fault, you're going to have me to deal with. But we made it through that little break and went to Miss Elizabeth Wilson's class. And it was on and popping up in there. We did science. Nobody had time to play. Nobody had time to talk. Nobody had time to name call, because she was on the money. She taught from the time we went in to the time we left. And I thought, this may not be as bad as I thought. All you have to do is have a little control. And the rest of that day, there was some control. The name calling did not seem as long, as hard, or as many names being called. Day one. And we went home, and Mama had a little briefing session. How did things go today? And I said, first period wasn't that, it was rough. It was rough. I had a mouthpiece. She said, did you say anything back? I said, not from under my breath. Under my breath, you could say whatever you want to say. They didn't know I was saying it. I said, under my breath, but I didn't get in any trouble. And after day one and a week or so, some of my best friends were some of those people who did the name calling, and we're still friends to this day, who did the pushing. And I shared a little bit before I got up here. One of my best friends, Dixie. That day, Dixie was a mean-spirited girl. But sometimes we don't know why people do what they do until they share the story. And years later, Dixie and I were talking. And we were kind of laughing about what we had gone through during integration. And she shared this, and I'll share it with you today. She said, Ethel, when my daddy would come in from work, before we would have dinner, he would have a lesson on black people. He would tell us all about black people, the negative things. And he would tell us the things to watch out for. He would tell us the things that black people do. And he would share so many bad stories about black people that I was really terrified that first day. See, not only were we terrified, the other race was terrified too, because they had been taught so many negative things in the home about African Americans. And Dixie shared that story. She said, my dad would sit down at the table and teach my sister and I about black people. He would tell us, don't trust them, they steal. Well, I have news for you. Anybody that's dishonest will steal. They kill. I have news. Lots of people kill, not just black people. But these things were taught, and they were innate. They were in her because she had heard them for so long. She had been taught by someone she trusted, and she believed them. And until we learn people, not by race, not by color, not by anything but what's in the heart, we will misjudge them. But you know, I'm glad that we had that honest conversation, Dix and I. And she told me why she was so mean-spirited, out of fear. Fear will grip us and cause us to do things and say things and be things that we're not. But there's no fear in love. Dixie and I learned to love each other, learned to get along with each other, and it became a relationship later on in life. I remember my 9th grade year, I made the basketball team. I wasn't always this size. I could play some basketball, y'all. I remember a girl got hurt and gave me the opportunity to play one night, and I got out there and I had an opportunity to show my stuff. And I played like it was no tomorrow and won a position because she didn't get to come back. I played ball, and I became friends with the ball team. Back then, Miss Darlene Langley, Miss Toy Willis's mama, your grandmama, was my basketball coach, and she was a dynamite coach. And she saw some skills in me, and she said, Ethel, we got to get some more black girls on this team. And we did. We got 3 or 4 more, but the team was predominantly white. But don't you know those girls treated me like a sister? I still have relationships with Toy. I still have relationship with Luann Lynn, Patty Faulkner, all of those girls that I played with, because they accepted me as a person, not as a little black girl that loved ball. So when we integrated, the integration in my 8th grade year, that first week or so started out rough, but things turned around because I made up in my mind, this is what I made up in my mind, that I'm not going to be a part of the problem. I want to be a part of the solution. I want to treat people the way I want to be treated. I'm not going to come here, and it does not matter what name I'm called. My mother taught us this in the home. If they don't call you by your name, if they don't say Ethel, they're not talking to you. And a lot of you need to remember that. If people don't call you by your government name, don't entertain mess. And I'm glad that lesson was taught in the home so I could carry it into the school. So integration for me, that high school year, I didn't have a problem with integration after a couple of weeks or so in 8th grade, because I showed my friends, my white friends, that I wanted them as friends, I wanted to be a friend, and I was genuine. I want to read this. 10 ways, here are 10 steps you can take to step out of the shadow of silence. A lot of times, a lot of people say, I'm not a racist. And when we think about a racist person, we think about just white people. But there are some black people with some hang-ups as well. But we have to love people in general. And a lot of times, you know, we hear racist jokes. We hear jokes about race, and we say nothing. We say nothing. We let it go by. You know, but if my friends make a race joke, I'm not going to laugh at it. I'm not going to let them think it's okay. I'm not going to chime in and make the race comment back. I'm not going to play that race card with them. A lot of times we're silent, but silence gives consent that I can do this more often. I can continue to do it because you did not come to the defense of what I said. So a lot of times we just have to speak up and say to our friends, you know, don't make that comment. Don't call them by that name. Don't say that about that race of people. Don't do that. That's not nice. Would you want someone to say that about you, about your father, about your mother, about your sister, or about your brother? So sometimes just not being complicit, not just accepting what people say and laughing about it, or not even laughing, not even doing anything. 10 steps we can take to step out of the shadow of silence. Learn about other people and their culture. Oftentimes we don't know any more. You know, we can see the Chinese people eating with chopsticks and we laugh, not even knowing that's their culture. We have to learn about other cultures. You know, a lot of times we see people eating things that we don't eat and we laugh. We have to learn about the culture of other people so we can appreciate their culture. And it goes beyond food and festivals. You know, why are we here today? Celebrating Black History Month. But how much history do you really know, even as a white student or a black student, about history, black history, our ancestors? How much do you really know? Or you just celebrate for the 28 days and you go back to your old ways, your old way of doing things, old way of not doing things. Learn about your history. Learn about culture. You have these iPhones, 10, 11. Have they made a 12? That's the bell. You know, learn about your history. Learn about your history. Explore the unfamiliar. Put yourself in situations where you stand up for someone other than yourself. Be a proactive person. Talk candidly about race. Don't be afraid to talk about race. If you're white, don't be afraid to talk to someone about the black history. If you're black, don't be afraid to talk to someone about the white history. Be candid with each other. That's what helped me having white friends. Learning things that I didn't understand or fully know by having conversation with them. Don't tell or laugh at stereotypical jokes. Think before you speak. Think before you call someone a name. Words can hurt. Be a role model and help educate others. But you got to educate yourself first. Don't make assumptions about people. Don't make assumptions about people. Consider how race and racism impact your life and the life around you. Don't let others give biased languages or behavior. Speak up. Take a position against hate and take a stand against racism. That's integration. Questions? You said they had questions?
Go ahead, y'all. Questions, go ahead and ask us.
Yes, sir. Can he come down? May he come down? May they come down with the questions so we can hear them?
They can come down.
Kind of address the question to everybody.
If you have a question, please come down.
How are all blacks and white interact at school? How did they? What was they like?
For me, I've always been a very vocal person. So I've always been where I've always been outspoken. I wanted to be a part of the solution, not the problem. So I've always kind of I mixed myself in with the whites. You know, if they were at a table at lunch and I went by that table and this table was full, I would say, can I sit here? I wouldn't say may, because my mother taught us may and can. If I say, can I sit here, I'm asking for your permission. May I sit here? May I sit here? Can I sit here? I would say, can I sit here? So they got to answer me. Yes, you can sit here, or no, you can't. And as I was saying, can I sit here, I was sitting down. So I kind of involved myself. But there were conflicts. Don't get us wrong. There were conflicts during integration. There were fights. There was a lot of name calling. But you had people in position who handled that, nipped it in the bud. They didn't let it progress to a point where it got out of hand. I don't ever remember a riot at school where things got out of hand. Not at my school. And I graduated in 1975. And I can't remember a riot. I can't remember a bad situation where things got out of hand. Because at that time, when we integrated, people were in position to handle problems. And if there was a weak person that had a lot of turmoil in their room, usually the principal hung down on that end of the hall. So things were handled to nip things in the bud. And with making friends, I think that helped us a lot, helped me a lot, that I was able to go in and make friends. Like I said, I loved basketball, and I hung with a group of girls that loved basketball. So I became a part of the clique.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Were you afraid that people might react violently to the segregation of the schools?
I was. Remember that first day when I got off that bus? I was terrified. But so were the other children. I was terrified of the name calling. I was terrified of being jumped on. I didn't know what to expect. I was terrified. But going into Miss Wilson's room and to see how she could gain control, because on the way in, things were said, but Miss Wilson jumped on it. She nipped it in the bud. That's what we call it. She nipped it in the bud. She nipped it in the bud. We're not having that foolishness up in here. Go take a seat. Firm, very firm. So yes, there were problems, and yes, I was afraid. I was terrified first period because things could have gotten out of control, but they didn't. And second period made a difference. It gave me a ray of hope that I'm going to be okay.
Good question.
Good question.
So the question is, did these ladies know anybody that participated in the civil rights movement?
Yes, I do. Miss Mamie J Banks, she was arrested in Colombia with the civil rights movement. And she's still very active with fighting for the rights of people. But I knew her personally. I worked with her. We taught school together. And she would always tell during Black History Month of how she spent that night in jail. She could have turned from the movement and she would not have been arrested. She chose to be arrested with the group to stand her ground. Yes. Good question.
There's a question for both of y'all ladies.
Okay.
Did y'all have?
Don't be shy.
Did y'all have any interracial friendships?
I had plenty. I did. Interracial friendships.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Did y'all have a lot of interracial friendships?
Yes, I did.
Describe one.
Yeah, I'm still close with, and I usually see them at Gold Rush here in McCormick because they come back for Gold Rush, and I'm there every year. So, and we're usually selling at Gold Rush. They make a point to come up to our booth and buy, and we have that basketball conversation. Ethel Whiteman, you remember when we did this? Yeah. So I still.
It still goes on. I work with the parents of this generation, that one. So as you've been working, I think I've been in the school system almost 52 years.
Mm.
And so I work with this generation, that one, and you can see them. They come back and you can see a difference in the change of the time when I came along. So those parents, it's easy to work with those parents because they became my friends. Whether they black or white. So yeah, still.
Good question. I know Mr. Basketball Star.
Yeah, both of y'all attend the church.
Attend church? Yes, I'm very active in my church now.
Yes, I am the YPD director at Big Greenwood McCormick from last year. This is my last year, so this year I'm still active with the youth at the church that I attend.
Are you meaning church then as children or now?
Yes,
Then? Oh yeah. Let me tell you about church. Can I tell them about church? We lived, let's say, from this school to, can't you remember we were down through the little cut by the planer and we had to walk to Shiloh. We lived from here to past the end of the road out front. And we never missed a church service on Sunday. My uncle, Torrance, which is dead now, he would come by on Sunday morning. Sunday school started at 10. He would come by at 9:35 and yell, "Come on out of there!" And out we went. We had to go to Sunday school as children. Yeah. So church was always a part of me.
You know where the memorial is now, where the old high school is down there. And this side is where the memorial men's is. Right behind there's a white house. That's the house that I lived in and grew up in. And the church was right down at the end of the road. So regardless of what, rain, sleet, or snow, you walked from there to there to take that dime to church every Sunday. When you got back, you had to tell something.
That's
And
it.
every day, every time my sister running in front of us, because all the way up the road, we'd be repeating what we're going to tell you. Every time she'll run in there, tell everything that we done said, and then the parents looking at us like, y'all didn't learn nothing? So we went to church. It was every Sunday. That was a must.
Did y'all church like participate in any civil rights activities?
And nowadays they do.
Did our church.
Oh, did you all personally participate in any civil rights?
Our church. I don't remember. I don't remember.
In those days, you had to do kind of sneak around and do things. You couldn't just outly come out and talk about this in church.
No.
So the deacons or the trustees or whatever, they would get together and they'll talk about it. But actually, to do anything about it, it was very dangerous. So it's my time to do it.
You had to be cautious.
Very, very, very. The most of civil rights and integration and segregation that I learned, I heard it in the home. Because my mother worked at a truck stop. So she was in the limelight of hearing what was going on in McCormick. So when she came home, she was cautious about what she would tell us. But she would tell us enough to let us know what was going on in the real world. This is the real deal out here. You're welcome. Thank you for your question.
This is Ken Durant.
Yes, sir.
Was there any local civil rights activities that you remember or participated in?
No. Not me. Not me.
Yeah, the NAACP that actually goes out and bring this in. I think they meet now. They're still meeting at Bethany Church in McCormick.
They are.
And they always come out and tell all the new rules and regulations. And when it's a march and things, they have to get everything together. They're still active in that way. They're right here in the center of McCormick County.
But before you leave, it's interesting to point out that, Ken's mom was a big sports star.
Yeah,
basketball
very.
player, But in a different generation.
Different generation.
So she really benefited from the things that you went through, the things you went
Yeah.
through. It's kind of like passing the torch on down.
I was getting ready to say that. I think every generation from segregation to integration, we learn lessons along the way. And because of Ken's mom, I watched her play. I watched that. And when you watched her play, I played basketball during the time where I was a forward, but the guards could not go. Only 3 people could go across the court. You see how everybody running the court now playing the court? When I played ball, we played half court. Only 3 people could go across the court. Everybody else stayed on this side of the court. And that was until I started varsity in 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade. My 11th grade year, during my 11th grade year, we could travel full court. And to watch Ken's mom run that court and not be tired, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm glad they let us go half court. But I saw her run that court. So yes, Mr. Hunt made a good point. I think every generation prepared the way for the next generation to be better and to do better. Thank you.
And she was left-handed, I heard.
Oh, she is good. Oh, she's good. She was good. And she could sing. She would win and sing a song.
All right, Zach, what do you got?
My question is, so you go to, like, when you go to a restaurant, did they put you in the back, and do you have to pay more for your food, and do you receive the same amount?
Miss Calaham may can attest to that. I just can remember my mother told us when we did get, because see, I didn't do a lot of going because there was not a vehicle in my home. But I remember when we did, when I was of age to go, and I started going with my friends who had a car. We didn't have a car. I didn't have a car. I remember getting out of basketball practice and my friends had to carry me home from the old high school up, and we lived up near the old drive-in. My friends had to carry me home. So tell me what you asked me. I lost my train of thought. Oh, about the food. When I went out with my friends, being with them, I think made a difference for me. I think I was accepted more being with white people, yes. So I don't think I got treated any differently when I went to the drugstore with them. I don't think I got treated any different when I went somewhere to eat with them because I was with them. It was like an underlining theme for my friends, she's with us. So I think I got a little treatment just having a little better treatment just having some white friends.
And see, that's a whole different era. When I came along, you going now through the drive-in, our drive-in was to go to the back. You come to the back door, order your food, get it from the back door, and you sit there and you wait out there. So no, we wasn't allowed to come in and be friends with you and sit down. That was unknown and unseen until years later. After years later, it began to change. Then they began to let us come in the inside and order. And many, many years later, we can sit and eat like we do now. But it was a change. It took time to get to that point.
I remember my first Coca-Cola, and Ms. Calaham can attest to this. As African American people, we could not buy a small Coca-Cola. My mother had taught us in the home, do not ask Mr. So-and-so for a Coca-Cola. We could not buy it. I remember the first one I got, a white friend brought it for me. And I turned it up, and they were so strong. They were so strong. I thought, this is why Mama didn't want us to have this. It was so strong. But there were things that I got, and I was treated after 8th grade, my 9th grade, 10th grade, all those years, I can remember having at least 8 white friends, 8. And they were good to me. If they ate, I ate. I could go to their house. So we're talking about even a different time period from Ms. Calaham to my time period with integration. How I was treated just by being a part of a white clique.
And how I could not be a part of a white clique. If we did, we had to do it in secret. Okay?
Did we answer you? If not, I'll clarify. I'll do my best. You satisfied? Okay.
Any other questions? Good. Here it is. Question?
Question?
238. If I could just make a few things I picked up on real quick. One is,
May I say one thing?
sure, absolutely.
If you leave here with nothing else today, just remember that from Ms. Callaham's time period to my time period, how things changed. Think about where you are now. We're talking about 1960. We're talking about the 70s. And now you're in 2021. Think about the changes that have taken place now versus when we started. But there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot more that can be done. We hear the news. We watch CNN. We watch Channel 6. We see racism is out there. It's not going anywhere. Hate and racism is not going anywhere until minds and hearts are changed. But we don't have to be a part of the problem. We can stand up and move out of silence and be a part of the solution. And look at us, the change from here to there. Think about the change from here to there.
I think tonight they're honoring Mr. Mims, and this is the same Mims I'm talking to that opened up the school for the colored people. He will be honored this evening at 6. They're naming the library after him. He's the same one that made sure we had books. So if you remember nothing else, remember to set your life to say good, better,
Best.
and
Never let it rest until good is better and better is best.
Thank you.
So what I picked up on in the last hour is this. One is, over my getting longer life, I've observed racial progress in eliminating racism and fully integrating society and treating everybody equally and fair. But the history of the United States is 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think these ladies can attest to that. So there is always progress, but sometimes it gets knocked back a step or 2. And then it's up to you to kind of push it even further. I know it sounds corny, but you young folks, in a few years, you'll be doing the pushing towards what's left of any barriers that keep people from treating each other equally. Second thing is that phrase, I've heard that since I came here, and that's just some hokey expression they say out in McCormick. I realize now
We lived by
rock
it.
solid, foundational, and super important to every generation. So when you say that, when we hear it in assemblies, think about it, how that goes back to, and how the words are so powerful when words like that really matter to people that needed something to hold on to, like these ladies right here. So, what can I tell you? Look, tonight they are dedicating the library. They're changing the name from, I don't even know it's named anything, but they're going to name it the Mims Library.
McCormick
And so you
Public
should
Library.
also reflect upon who Dr. Mims was and what he did for the community. He's the George Washington of McCormick, if you want to put it that way. So that's all I've got to say. And I think, we really, the small group of us, you just absorbed a whole lot of, stuff that you can't get anywhere else. This is the very real deal right here, the best you can get in terms of reflection on what happened in this community. And I hope you got a lot out of it, all right?
I got this. Am I still on? I forget. The teacher in me. How many of you like writing? Like to write? 1 person? 2 people? 2 people. Okay. Well, I'll talk to these 2 people. Come here. I'll talk to these 2 people. Anyone else? If you like to write, come here. Just step out here. Okay. Only 3 people in this room like to write. So, here's the deal. I am posing an essay for you. 1st, 2nd, 3rd place winner. 1st place winner gets $50. 2nd place winner gets $25. 3rd place winner gets $25. That's my $100. I will give you my number. I'm going home and devise a topic and things I'm looking for. 1st place is $50. 2nd place is $25. 3rd place is $25 in essay writing. it will be due back to me. I will find the panel to read it and judge it, and I will get back with you with your prize winning money. Thank you.
Well, you're all welcome to do that. If you're shy getting up here.
Now, I didn't do that to embarrass anybody. Mr. Hunt made a good point. Anybody can join in with the writing. There are 3 winners, first, second, third place winners. First place winner gets $50, second $25, third $25. I will give
The
Mr. Hunt
subject
a
would be,
date.
what does integration mean to you, or
Yeah, on that line. It's about Black history and integration.
Black history and integration? So it's
I just thought about that on the way in. God gave me that idea on the way in. So I'm going to get to Mr. Hunt by email. I'll get your email address. And when I get home, I will work on topic and what I'm looking for in the essay. And I'll shoot you an email. And you can give it to them. And I will have him a date. You're not going to drag this out a year. You will have to, if I'm going to give you a piece of money for doing it, I want some quality work. Don't give me junk. And don't throw it together the night before, because I am an English major, so I'm not looking for junk. And I'm not going to give money for junk. So put it together, get your ideas together, and I will give you the date when it's due. It's due that day at that time, no exceptions. So don't bring it to Mr. Hunt. When I tell Mr. Hunt I'm picking it up at 12 o'clock next Friday, I will be here at 12 o'clock, and if it's not up front in the office, I will not take it. Okay? So you have to put forth some effort as well. Okay? All right. Thank you.